Hi, Mel. Can you hear me okay?
I can. So sorry. I'm actually driving, so I was muted. It took me a
Oh,
second
no
to get to the button.
problem. No problem. No problem. I'm expecting that people are just going to be showing up however they can because it was really short notice.
Sure.
And I'm just admitting people in from the waiting room right now. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes to wait for people to join us. And just a couple housekeeping things before we get started. I know that it's Mother's Day weekend, so there's a lot going on. So what I'm doing is I'm recording this and I'll be sending it to my subscribers, and I'll also be putting it into my private Facebook group, The Art of Healthy Authentic Marriages. That's not a public group. It's only going to be visible in there for other people that are in the group. Um, so if anybody doesn't want to be seen on here, you can keep your camera off. You can also change your name or remove your name in Zoom if that's a concern for you in terms of privacy. Some people have, their full name, and some people don't want to be recorded on these things. That's totally fine. But I just wanted to be really transparent about the fact that I am recording this, and it's something that I will be sharing with people that weren't able to make it live. So just keep that in mind. I'm also going to ask everybody to just stay muted for the first part of this talk because I'm just going to be sharing some things first, and then I'm going to open it up to Q&A. And most people know Zoom now. When I first started coaching, most people did not know how to use Zoom, but then COVID came along and the whole pandemic, everybody learned how to use it. So I think most people know how to raise their hand on here. If you don't, if you go to the bottom of the window, there's a place where it says reactions, and in there you can raise your hand. So at the end, once I'm done presenting, when I open it up for questions, um, just raise your hand, and I'm just going to kind of go in order with the raise hands. All right. So with that said, you guys, today I'm excited that I'm going to get to share with you, and this is going to be very informal. I don't have slides or anything fancy, but I'm just going to go over the 9 steps that I teach my clients to transform their marriage. Now, some of what I'm going to be sharing has been touched upon in my masterclass, where I talk about the 5 shifts. And a lot of people that are on my subscriber list or in my Facebook group have already seen this masterclass and are already familiar. Some of you may not have seen it. I have a replay. If anybody wants to see it, let me know and I'll send it to you. But this talk, there may be a little overlap. There may be some concepts that are familiar to you based on that masterclass, but this is very different because I'm actually, instead of sharing the shifts that need to happen, I'm actually going to be going over the exact steps in the order that I take my clients through, that I found over the years to be the most effective in terms of, if I had to boil the work that we do in transforming our marriages from the inside out into a blueprint, this would be like the closest that we can get to that. And this is really around, how do we change our dynamics in our marriage or the relationship from the inside out? This is something you can do on your own as long as there's no preconditions. Now, when I say preconditions, what I mean by that is a condition that might exist in the relationship, in particular, something that's on your spouse's side of the street that would have to be addressed first before anything would actually land or be able to be effective in terms of the changes that you're making. So, for example, if you have a spouse that has an acute, untreated addiction that is adversely affecting the relationship, um, or they fell off the wagon and they're going on major benders, and it's making them really volatile, that I would consider that a precondition, because then what that means is, no matter what I teach you, no matter all the things I'm going to share with you here today, those won't really move the needle in a lasting, significant way if your spouse has a precondition. Another example of a precondition would be if your spouse is a full-blown narcissist. Now, narcissism is a really popular topic. People talk about this all the time. Everybody thinks everyone's a narcissist now. I say this in the sense of the actual diagnosis. If somebody meets 7 or more of those criteria, they're a narcissist. Your spouse might have narcissistic traits. It doesn't make them a full-blown narcissist. What we're really looking for is, do we have any leverage? A precondition is something that takes away our leverage to be able to move the needle through boundaries, through the changes that we're making in our dynamic, or our part of the dynamic, right? The dance that we do in a marriage. If we change our part in the dance, the other person can't do the same dance with us anymore. When our spouse has a precondition, like an acute untreated mental health condition, like let's say somebody's got bipolar 1, they've gone off their medications, they're not sleeping, they're manic, they're not able to relate in a healthy way, they're not able to receive any sort of communication without flying off the handle, that is a precondition in that sense, that would need to be handled or stabilized first. Then these things will apply. But that's just a really long caveat. In most cases, these steps, are going to be enough for you to be able to fully transform the relationship, even if your partner isn't wanting to join you in counseling. So, if your spouse is not joining you today in this, don't worry about it. If you're worried that they may not listen to the replay, don't worry about it. You alone can make a lot of changes in your relationship. So, what I was going to just ask you guys to do is just settle in. I'll be admitting people from the waiting room as we go, as people kind of straggle in. Just close the other windows on your machine. If you're sitting at a desktop or if you're on your device, just close everything out so you can stay focused and just remove all your distractions. Take some notes if you want to just like anchor what it is that I'm sharing. And don't sweat it if you miss something, because this is, like I said, being recorded and you will be able to get a replay after this. So again, for the people that are just joining, if anybody does not want to be seen, I am recording this. I will be sharing this with my subscribers, and I will be posting the replay in the Art of Healthy Authentic Marriages, which is a private group, but sometimes people, they don't want to be, seen attending something like this for your own privacy reasons. If you are concerned about that, you can go into the Zoom settings and you can take your name out of there temporarily for this, or you can dial in on your phone instead of using the link. And I think if you dial in on your phone, it doesn't show your name. I'm not sure. It depends on your settings, but I've seen that before, that people have chosen to take that option. So, and that's it for housekeeping. And I'm just glad you guys are able to make it. I will keep my eye out for other people joining in the waiting room. I know, like I said, this is really short notice, so I didn't even know if anybody was going to show up at all, but it's really great to see you guys here. So I'm going to get started without further ado. We're going to go over the 9 things that I teach my clients, and we're not going to get into all of the how we do this, but I want to kind of go over in order. These are the steps that I would recommend if you're in a relationship where you're like, we really love each other, but we have these dysfunctional dynamics. We keep going over the same pattern. We keep getting in the same argument. We keep, processing things in the same exact way, where we have a big blow up and then we shut down and then we don't talk for a few days, round and round. And most of my clients have been together for 20 or more years. So these can be very deeply entrenched patterns. And that's really what I had in mind when I developed this. So, and also this is something that I learned trial and error in my own marriage, and then working with clients too, to try to share what it was that I learned. So the very first step, and I'm going to go through 9 different things in order. And I teach this in order. I don't recommend going out of order in this. You don't want to just pick one and just start working on that one thing, even though you might actually have one area that really feels more relevant to you right now than other areas. You really don't want to skip anything in this process. So the very first step when people first start working in the couples care is they have to get really clear about what their vision is, right? And so what this means is we're really leading with a goal in mind. I think people overlook this. Most people think, okay, let's just dive in and start tackling these problems. Here's what I don't like. Here's what's wrong. Usually it's really easy to see what's wrong with our spouse, but we forget about, well, what do we want instead? Right? So if these problems weren't here, here's a way to get to your vision. You ask yourself the question, what would my marriage look like if the problems that I've identified were removed? If I could just surgically remove them or magically remove them, what would my marriage look like? What would have me feeling really stoked and celebrating and grateful every day? That's your vision. And I think a lot of people, not only do they skip this, but then when they actually do it, they don't think big enough. They are very, and this is human nature. Our brains are wired to look for signs of danger to stay safe and protect ourselves. So we don't want to let ourselves think too big or dream too big, or to get our hopes up around something that feels too good to be true. But in my experience, you have to let yourself dream. You have to let yourself really imagine what your wildest fantasy would be in your marriage. And the reason for this is because when you can picture it, you're actually creating new neural networks in your brain. And it is becoming, if you can visualize it, it becomes more possible for you. If it becomes true on the inside of you, it is so much easier to manifest that on the outside. So we have to start with visualizing, and that's the most important thing. And some questions that you can ask yourself, in addition to what would it look like if my problems were gone, is what, three questions that I ask people. How does your spouse show up in your ideal scenario? So, like, what would my fantasy husband be? What would my fantasy wife be? My ideal partner, how do they show up? What qualities do they exhibit? What actions do they take? What adjectives would I use to describe them? What energy are they bringing? And really just picture that first. That's the easiest thing for people to start with, is how they want their partner to be different. So that's fun, right? To think about that. Then the second part is, what are our dynamics like? So dynamics, that is really anything that constitutes an interaction between the two of you. That has to do with distribution of labor. How do you decide who does what? How do you plan your vacations? How do you co-parent? How do you process conflict? How do you make a decision when you have a difference of opinion? How do you bring things to each other that are areas of concern? How do you express affection? What's your intimacy like? How do you guys problem solve, right? So that's the dynamics. And those are just examples. Don't be limited by the examples that I'm giving you, but those are questions to kind of just get the wheels turning. And then the third part is, you want to think in terms of, now, how do I show up in my ideal marriage? So what this means is two things. One is, it could be, if my spouse showed up in the best, most ideal way. Let's just imagine they were like my fantasy spouse, and I had that and I was leaning into it. How would I then show up? How would I feel? What would the energy be that I bring to certain situations? How would I be treating them? How would I be communicating? How affectionate would I be if I had my dreams? So that's one way to arrive at this answer. Another way to arrive at this answer is, what is it? Who do you need to be to create the environment in which your ideal relationship thrives? So, a relationship is really, it's like an ecosystem or a biosphere. It's like there's air between you. There's energy between you that is greater than the sum of its parts. And so if you really think in terms of, well, what do I need to create? What environment or ecosystem do I need to create that would support the growth of my ideal partner or my ideal dynamics? How would I have to show up in order to set the stage for that? So that's another way that you can approach that. But it's so important to know, where are you going? If you're working on your marriage and you don't know where you're going, you're staying in the world of the problem, the mental world of the problem. Like, you're just reacting and trying to put out fires if you are not being guided by a very clear vision of where you're going. So that's number one. And that's actually really fun. If you can just let yourself go there, don't worry and think, oh, this is too good to be true. Yeah, well, that could never happen because I already know how my spouse is and I already know how I am. People get really discouraged by this, but the truth is that what you're experiencing right now and the feedback that you're getting in your immediate environment that might tell you that your vision is not possible is just the residue of the past. It actually has no bearing on what's possible for you in the future. And what you can create in the future is created in the present moment. So right now, if you can even imagine what it is where are you going? When you get into a taxi cab, you don't tell them where you don't want to go, right? There's too many ways. There's too many other possibilities that then they would have to deduce. And you're not clear. You have to be clear to get there. I mean, you could get there, but it would just take you a really, really, really long time. And in my experience, when couples are in crisis, they don't have time. Like, time is working against you if you're in crisis. You want to make active use of that and get to where you're going as fast as you can. So getting clear on the vision is number one. Step number two, once you have that vision and you're like, okay, this is how you're going to start with part three of that vision. How do I show up? Because I can't control my spouse. I can't change my dynamics overnight, but I can set my intention around how I lead with my vision and what I need to be doing. I can act as though I'm already in that fulfilled relationship, or I can lead with planting seeds into the ecosystem of the relationship or into the soil of the relationship, or whatever metaphor you want to use. How can I plant seeds every day to start to lower the walls of resentment in my spouse, or to sort of defy the dominant narrative if they're looking upon me in a judgmental fashion, if they have a lot of hurt, if they don't trust me anymore? We have to actually be really patient to systematically and consistently defy that narrative with action steps that are supportive of a new story. So that brings me to the second part, and that's pattern interrupt. So pattern interrupt is so with the vision, you're creating a new story. This is going to be the new story of my marriage. Pattern interrupt is to say, what is the old story and what is not working, and what do I need to stop doing? How do I stop what's not working? Which I know is, of course, so much easier said than done. I remember when I was trying to make changes in my marriage, I had a problem with just complaining a lot and being pretty critical, or bringing things up in a way that was globalizing. So it really came across as critical. That wasn't my intention. My intention was to be able to identify patterns so that I could feel like there was some validity to what I was saying, but it sounded really critical. So I was working on this, and I remember telling myself, okay, for the next 2 weeks, I'm not going to say anything about these things. I'm going to just give us a break, right? Like, just not say anything and focus, stay in my lane, focus on the things I can control, and just not say anything. I could not do it. And I have a strong will, but I couldn't do it. I mean, not at first. I had to continue practicing, and I'd fall off the wagon and then I would hop back on again, and then I'd fall off the wagon and hop back on again. But with the vision, right? If you have the vision in mind, it's okay. You just have to normalize that. Pattern interrupts are not easy, but you have to set your intention to say, I will stop doing what isn't working, and I will start doing the things that might work. I will rock the boat. Honestly, anything different is a pattern interrupt. You don't have to know what all the new tools are. You don't have to know all the skills yet. Just interrupting the pattern is going to be really, what's the word I'm looking for? It's going to be profound. It creates curiosity in your spouse, especially if you're doing this on your own and your spouse is leaning out or they're ambivalent. You can just start interrupting the pattern on your own. Stop doing the things they expect you to do. Start doing things they didn't expect you to do, that all in service of your vision, mind you. They will start to get curious and be like, what's going on over there? Like, I don't really understand. And they're going to start to lean in a little bit more, and you start to plant the seeds of possibility for something to be different. Okay. So for this part, you want to write down, what are the things that I know that I do that make it worse? No matter how justified, no matter how understandable, no matter how wrong it is what they're doing, just looking at your side and saying, the part that I play, I'm going to interrupt that right now. It could be that you set a boundary. It could be that you stop crossing a boundary. It could be that you choose your words carefully. It could be that you shift your attention off of your spouse and onto other things. Whatever that is for you, even if it feels hard, you write that down and get really clear in your own mind to set your intention, and you look at that every single day. Okay. So that's the second thing. You have to be willing to interrupt the pattern. Now, part of that, a couple more things I want to say about that is, it's about expanding the positive interactions, the number of positive interactions, and tabling the hot button issues. This is one of the hardest things. Like, when my clients come in first and start this process, they really are frustrated because they say to me, I came here because I wanted to solve these hot button issues, right? I wanted to solve this. And now you're telling me that I have to table it. And especially for people that have been struggling with avoidance or who have an avoidant partner, that is going to feel like losing. It's going to feel like you're giving up something, like you're losing ground and you're not making any progress. But in the context of actually doing, building the new foundation and getting really clear on your vision and all the steps I'm going to share with you, it isn't avoidance. It's just a temporary deferral because you just aren't ready. If what you've been doing hasn't been working thus far, it's not going to just start working now, right? You have to table it, interrupt the pattern, and start to build the new story. Get some legs under you first, clear the energy between you. And then when you come back in to try to solve these issues, your spouse is going to hear you differently. Everything is going to be perceived differently. Because what I've learned is, no matter how perfectly you try to say something or how good your intentions are, if it feels like the old story to your partner, if they have a certain perceptual filter on, it just won't land. And so there's a reason why we want to table these things in the beginning, at least for the first 3 weeks or so, is because you want to have your partner in a place of curiosity and open-mindedness, and like, I can really feel that my partner is trying. I can feel that things are a little bit better. You have to build the emotional connection. I'm going to get to that. That's step 6. But once you have that emotional connection and that sense of safety and trust, then you can come in and start talking about the hot button issues. Once you have the skills and the tools, and the perceptual filters are now allowing you guys to see each other as allies, not as enemies. So that's why you want to table the hot button issues. The other thing I wanted to mention about pattern interrupt is you want to think about this in terms of, I'm going to try to change the ratio of positive to negative. Most people that are on the brink are at around 50-50 or less positive to negative interactions. People can stay together for a long time at 50-50, but that's a really draining and toxic place to live for the long term. So for pattern interrupt, what you want to think of is, okay, how do I expand the number of positive interactions? For some people, that's going to be love languages. For some people, that's going to be just, what your partner likes, what are some, positive experiences between the two of you. Whether it's affection, whether it's having a nice dinner, whether it's just not bringing up things that are difficult, not putting any pressure on the relationship, whatever that is for you, expand the number of positive interactions and shore up the negative. So if you keep those two things in mind, that will alone help you with the pattern interrupt. So after vision and pattern interrupt, which are the first two, then we move into the third thing, which is emotional regulation. Now, this is so important because once you stop the pattern, you're going to have feelings. And the reason why is because the cycles that you're in are actually, they have a secondary gain for you, or all of us as humans. They have a secondary gain in the sense that it's a strong muscle memory. It's a coping skill that we've learned that served us in childhood, but no longer serves us now. When we stop those patterns, we're going to feel all of the emotions that we're defending against when we're engaged in those dysfunctional patterns. So if you don't know how to regulate your emotions, which is really what I'm talking about here is like triggers. Once you get triggered, no matter what you've learned, no matter what you've decided you're going to not do or what you're going to start doing, it's going to go out the window. Because once we go into fight or flight, or we have a strong emotion, we go into fight or flight, and our brains cannot access what it is that we already know. So we have to learn how to recognize, oh, those are my triggers. Here are these really overwhelming emotions, and to know what to do to regulate those emotions. There's actual techniques that I teach, but for just, if you guys, you guys are welcome to share what has worked for you guys in the chat box if you want to. But I think tapping is a fantastic, I'm not a specialist in tapping. There's lots of videos about tapping on YouTube. You can look it up. I think it came from a guy named, I want to say Craig or Gary Callahan. And it was originally found to be very effective with phobias and panic disorder. But it's very effective for any overwhelming emotions. If you get triggered and you're just really angry, or if you're extremely anxious and you're just, because it's one thing to say, all right, I'm not going to say these things. I'm not going to react in these ways. This is what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to stop doing that isn't working in my pattern interrupt. You can decide that. But if once you get triggered, you're not able to remember that or actually execute that intention, that's usually an emotional regulation problem. So you want to be really aware of what are the emotions that are going to come up from change. It's almost like splitting apart atoms. When you break apart the pattern, it releases a lot of energy, and it comes in the form of emotions that will sabotage us if we're not aware of them. And if we don't learn how to go inward around that and set boundaries on ourselves around that and take ourselves into safe places to be able to process that. Okay. So that's number 3 is emotional regulation. Check out tapping. And if any of you in here have had success with emotional regulation techniques, I welcome you to share them in the chat box as well. Another thing, step 4, this is a really big, I think it piggybacks off of the emotional regulation piece, because when I talk about triggers, those come from our subconscious limiting beliefs, our old programs. Our programs, we absorbed our programs before we even had a choice. You know, the first 7 years of our life are when we start to just absorb the world around us, and the messages that we get, the meaning that our brain makes out of that becomes our hardwiring. So once that's hardwired, that becomes the automatic response. And that's why I say trigger. Trigger is something that just happens really fast. It's something that is really hard to control. You're not even aware of it. It bypasses your conscious mind. So what we have to do, so for example, let's say I have a client who has abandonment issues because she actually, her biological mother had to give her up. She was 3 years old. There's a trauma history there, and she was adopted into an amazing family. And she wouldn't change a thing about that. However, in those early years, she really did sort of internalize this fear of being left, and which as a child is a life or death situation. It feels like a life or death situation in adulthood as well, if that was a childhood wound. So wherever our wounds are going to come up as triggers. So in her situation, even something really minor like her partner was 10 minutes late will activate that abandonment fear that is disproportionate to the situation. That's about her own triggers. And she's got some limiting core beliefs at the subconscious level that are really around her own worthiness, that she's not going to be able to count on the person that she needs the most, that when you really need someone, the connection is tenuous and nobody can be trusted. These are some limiting core beliefs that were not conscious. It wasn't something that she was aware that it's not like she was thinking that on purpose, but she was operating on a biological level from that assumption. That's what I mean when I say those programs that are subconscious. We have to change those limiting beliefs and start to internalize worthiness, safety, and competency. Those are the three core areas that we need to change our limiting beliefs around if they are not serving us. Now, some of us don't have a lot. I mean, everybody probably has something that they would be willing to change in terms of their beliefs if it's not in service of their goals. If you have a conscious goal in your marriage and you have not been able to execute it, no matter how bad you want it, and I've been there, it's because you have limiting beliefs at the subconscious level that are activating you, that you are operating from, that are just simply stronger than your most intelligent, creative, conscious mind. Because the subconscious mind is actually like millions of times more powerful. For those of you that heard my masterclass, you've probably heard this already. This comes from Bruce Lipton's work, Biology of Belief. Our conscious mind can process 40 bits of information per second, which seems like a lot, right? In 1 second. But our subconscious mind can process 40 million bits of information per second. So anytime you kind of just know something and you don't know why you know it, it's because your subconscious programs have picked up on data and have given you a message that in below the surface of your consciousness. So there's a lot that we know intuitively, but where we get it twisted is what is our intuition that's coming from our higher place and really understanding from a place of deep wisdom what's happening that we can trust in ourselves, versus what are my fears or my limiting beliefs that came from a place of trauma that are now telling me lies. And it feels real, right? What's the difference between fear-based programming and intuition? That's what we have to separate out. And that comes from really looking inward and getting really clear. The fastest way that I can describe the distinction is that when we're operating from a place of wisdom and intuition, it feels expansive, even if it's scary. It can be scary, but you don't eliminate fear with intuition. However, it feels expansive. Whereas when you're being operated by fear and old programs that aren't serving you, it feels more constricted and it feels more just like the same. And if you follow it, nothing changes. So that's the difference. Which thing of what you're listening to, is it going to lead to change or is it going to lead to sameness? And that's another way that you can tell. But there's ways that you can change your limiting beliefs at the subconscious level. A lot of people talk about meditation. People talk about self-hypnosis. There's also NLP. I use psychological kinesiology, which is using muscle testing to help confirm that some of your new beliefs are going in. But if you have, it's actually not hard at all to change your limiting beliefs. It's sort of like cognitive behavioral therapy. The idea is, the premise of that is, if I change my beliefs, I will change how I feel, which is true, but it only engages the conscious mind, and it uses affirmations, which are great, but if they're not going to get filtered down into the subconscious mind, you won't really ever believe it. You'll just feel like you're telling yourself something that isn't true. So the trick is bringing those new beliefs, like I am worthy, I am securely attached, I am safe in the world. Um, you know, sorry, I'm just going to admit some people here from the waiting room. Um, I'm capable of having a healthy, authentic relationship is an example of a positive core belief. I am worthy of having a safe and healthy relationship where I can share my deepest truths without judgment. That's another example. Um, and now I can't remember which ones I've done now, but the three categories are competency, safety, and worthiness. So you want to really look into that and figure out, okay, so if I'm reacting with a lot of anxiety or panic, that is usually the brain and the body reacting from a place of I'm not safe. So if your core thing is anxiety, start with beliefs around safety, that you're safe, that you don't actually have to trust someone else with your life because you trust yourself, right? So it could be self-love, it could be self-trust, it could be trusting others. And core beliefs are not beliefs about your partner. Core beliefs are beliefs about yourself or the world or love in general. So you could do a core belief like, I remain open-minded when my loved ones give me feedback, right? If you tend to get defensive and you feel like the defensiveness is coming from a place of assuming that you're being attacked, then a core belief that would be supportive to you would be something along the lines of, I remain curious and open-hearted when I receive feedback from my loved ones. And you're not making it person specific. Or you could even say, I embrace feedback from my loved ones because I'm safe and because it helps me grow. So those are just some examples. But if you know that there's some thought processes or deeply held beliefs that are working against you, none of the tools that I would ever teach, or then any tools that you could ever find anywhere, will not stick. They will not yield long lasting, permanent transformation in your relationship unless you clear out the limiting beliefs that will sabotage you. Because, like I said, they're stronger and they will win. And it's not your fault. It's just the way the brain works. It's the way that we evolved biologically as humans. So that's a really important secret sauce, I think, to lasting change. So now you know what your vision is. You've interrupted the pattern. You're aware of the emotions that are coming up around that now. And because you have to be able to, you can't just immediately go right to changing your limiting beliefs if you're super dysregulated. So that's why you want to make sure you know how to regulate yourself first. The changing the limiting beliefs is more of a long-term strategy. Emotional regulation is more of a short-term, in the moment. How do I smooth out my energy? How do I make it so that I'm not just reacting from a knee-jerk automatic response, which is not in service of my conscious goals? So those are the first four steps. And you guys, I'm going to be opening this up for questions at the end of this. So please collect your questions. And then at the end, I'm going to open it up and you guys can raise your hand and I'll kind of go one by one to get your questions answered. So then the next thing is step 5. After you've done that, you really want to look at boundaries. Now, when I talk about boundaries, and I know a lot of people think boundaries are just about saying no, you know, saying no when you really mean it instead of saying yes, that's a boundary. That's true. That's what most people think of. But there's also internal boundaries, which is holding boundaries on ourselves. So internal boundaries are the kind of boundaries that keep all of our own dysfunction contained so that we don't spill out our stuff onto someone else in a way that is crossing their lines or hurting them or overstepping, right? That's an internal boundary. An external boundary is being able to say to someone else outside of you, here's what's okay and here's what's not okay. Now, this is not to be confused with controlling another person. Holding boundaries is actually relinquishing of control. It's relinquishing everything that's on the other side of the line. Boundaries are just what divide us from others. It's the line that defines us, because if we don't know who, if there's no line, then we can't tell who we are. We think if our partner's having a bad day, that we're having a bad day. We can't tell the difference, right? So boundaries are really a way to define who we are. And part of that, and honoring that, is nothing less than being authentic and being really, really healthy. Sort of like if you think of the human body and the way that cells work together, a cluster of cells that share the same function make up an organ, right? They're up against each other. These cells are right up against each other, but they're separate, but they work together cohesively. Now, when you don't have good boundaries in your cells, you either end up with cancer, or you end up with some kind of autoimmune disorder where your body can't tell the difference between a foreign body and yourself. So it starts to attack your own body, right? That's what autoimmune disorders are. It can't tell the difference. In the same way, psychologically, we need those boundaries to be healthy, and it doesn't wall us off, contrary to what a lot of people think. Boundaries actually allow us to be closer, because we can be very generous. We are so much more loving and generous when we're secure in our own boundaries. Now, going back to the control piece and how people get this conflated, boundaries are not the same thing as ultimatums. Boundaries are not telling somebody what to do. They're just telling someone what you will participate in and what you won't participate in. What will you do to hold your own boundaries? So communicating your boundary to somebody is just like the first step. That is not going to do it. What's going to do it is then knowing, how will I hold that for myself, and then actually consistently executing on that. So, like, for example, I have a friend that's chronically late, and I know it's not personal. I know she can't help it, but it wastes a lot of my time. And so I used to get really mad at her, and then when she would finally show up after I'd been waiting for 45 minutes, we wouldn't even have a good time because I was like resentful and acting that out. I'm like withholding, and I'm not being as warm, and it just isn't as good because I've crossed my own boundary. So what I do now is I just say, I'll wait this long. I'm coming, and if you're not here by this time, then I'm going to leave. And just because I have things to do, I'm not going to take it personally. I'm not mad, but I'm not going to wait any longer than this. And that worked after a couple of times, right? But I had to actually leave. I actually had to leave places that we were meeting because I had to hold my own line, and it was very uncomfortable. I felt really guilty. But in the end, it made me feel so much more generous towards this friend because I'm holding my own boundary. I don't need her to do it. I can do it. And so we are responsible for our own boundaries. So, same with drinking. I had a client and there's a video about this that you guys can check out, actually, Boundaries versus Ultimatums, on my YouTube channel, where you can hear this in more detail. But she was really triggered by her partner's drinking because she had had a marriage with someone who was an alcoholic. And so, but she didn't want to get into the habit of like keeping track of how many drinks he was drinking or asking him how much he had to drink. And she just wasn't going to do that old story anymore. So to protect herself, she let him know, hey, if we meet up and it seems like if your speech is slurred, or you feel if it feels like you're really intoxicated, just so you know, I'll have to go do some other things, and we'll just get together, when you're sober. Not that I'm mad, it's just what I have to do to take care of myself. So there's no hard feelings, but it was something that she had to do. And it was so scary for her to do because she said, I'm afraid that I'm getting controlling. And I said, you're just controlling yourself, which every grown-up has the right to do. If anybody makes you feel guilty for having control over your own life and how you're going to spend your time and what the choices you're going to make, that's not healthy. Right. And so you want to stand your ground and always remember, we're all grown-ups. We all have the right to decide what we're going to support and what we're not going to support based on our own values. And if anybody ever challenges you on that and says, you know what, that's not unconditional love, I would say, a marriage is not, I don't believe in unconditional love in a marriage. I believe that we do have conditions. We all do, right? We might have different conditions. My conditions might be different. Some people would say, you know what, as you can be verbally abusive to me, but as soon as you're verbally abusive to the kids, I'm leaving to protect the kids. That's my line. That's my boundary. For some people, it's going to be infidelity. For some people, it's going to be a certain way of communicating, raising voices. It's too triggering. I can't be in a marriage where there's lots of raised voices. That's not in support of me. We all have the right as grown-ups to prioritize the values that we're upholding and the health of our lives over the person. That's my opinion. That's just my opinion. Not everybody's going to agree with me on that. But when you hold a standard, and this goes back to the vision, and you have to know what your own deal breakers are, honestly, because we don't all have the same deal breakers, and there's no judgment on that. It really is just you get to decide what the culture is of the relationship that you want to be in and what you want your family legacy to be. And it's okay to draw hard lines, even with someone that you love deeply, to uphold that for yourself. And actually, what I find is that boundaries actually give your spouse the opportunity to grow in ways that they wouldn't grow if those boundaries were not being held. Boundaries are where all of our leverage is. When we hold boundaries for ourselves, it gives our spouse the opportunity to be like, oh, if I want to connect with this person, if I want to have a good relationship with this person, I'm going to have to join them there. I'm not going to be able to pull them back into this old thing. Now I have to grow in order to join them there, and then we can have a great relationship. If they don't join you there, then you have the choice. You have to make a choice. Do I want to prioritize the health of myself and my family and the relationship over the person? And that's why you have to know what your deal breakers are. That's part of the vision in step 1. So you got to know your boundaries. And like I was saying, just right at the outset with boundaries, it's a very profound thing. It's not just about saying no. It's about saying what is okay and what is not okay. And how do I hold myself to that standard for the internal containing boundaries? And how do I hold lines for myself against outside forces that might not like the boundaries that I'm setting right now? Because if you start setting boundaries that you haven't had before, not everybody's going to be thanking you for that. Right. And that's okay. That's okay. We don't have to have them like it. We just have to have internal clarity for our own selves. That's the most important thing. So then, and all of this, what I've shared so far, all of these steps: vision, pattern interrupt, emotional regulation, changing beliefs at the subconscious level, and boundaries, all of this falls under phase 1, which is looking inward and cleaning up our side of the street, getting really strong and clear. Where are we going? What are we here for? What are we building? What are we willing? What are we changing? And what can we own? Right? That's where all of our control is. A lot of people come in and they're like, I want you to get through to my spouse. But I have everybody look inward first. There's always something, even if it's just 2%. Maybe you only play 2% in the dysfunctional dynamics. It's not always 50-50, that's for sure. But if you own 100% of that 2%, you're going to have traction and you're going to have leverage. So all of these steps are really part of getting clear inside of yourself, cleaning up your side of the street, and having that internal clarity that is going to help you with the next stages. Okay. So now we get to step 6, which is emotional connection. So emotional connection, for those of you that have not heard my masterclass, is not about expressing emotion, and it's not about emotional support. What emotional connection is the consistency and predictability and accessibility of your partner being there for you when you're in distress, if you're having a hard time. Emotional connection is like if you are struggling and you turn towards your spouse, they turn toward you too. What this means is you feel safe, you feel heard, you feel seen, you feel like you don't have to be perfect, you feel like you don't have to choose between being authentic and preserving your connection. If you have to choose between authentically expressing what's happening for you, and I don't mean, when I say authentic expression, I'm not talking about venting on your spouse or having, like blowing up and exploding all over them because that feels authentic. I'm not talking about like unbridled self-expression. I'm just saying, if you feel like you can't say, you know what, that really hurt my feelings, or I'm really struggling with something, if you feel like you can't do that without losing a close connection with your partner, then you're in a bind. You have to choose between authenticity and emotional connection. And that's not a good choice to be in. And I think a lot of children, I mean, I grew up this way. Even my kids, when I put them in timeouts, I think about it. Like when they're expressing their emotions in a way that I find is unacceptable. So then I'm separating them in timeout, and I'm thinking that's so much better than getting spanked how I was raised. But what I was teaching them was, you're having a hard time. You need to be alone until you feel better. Then we can connect, right? We can connect when you're feeling better and you're well behaved, but not before then. And so a lot of us learn that, like, we're not safe if we share what's really going on and we're having a really hard time. Either we're going to judge ourselves, or we're afraid that they're going to judge us, or they're going to make a lot of meaning out of it. They're going to think, oh, this is what it means. It's not really what we think it means. And so we just think, I'll just keep it to myself because it's not worth it. It's not worth it for me to disrupt the connection. So emotional connection is absolutely critical. And this is part of what I was saying at the very beginning, that perceptual filter that we must have in order to hear any communication. So a lot of times traditional couples counseling leads with the problem, and they lead with communication, and they say, all right, so what's wrong? All right, let's talk about how we can communicate. Let's use an I statement. Let's use this tool. Let's use that tool. None of that is really going to work if you don't have emotional connection first. Most people feel like they have to solve all their problems in order to have the emotional connection. Once we solve the problems, then everything can be okay. It's actually the other way around. First, we build emotional connection and safety, then we can talk about the hot button issues, right? Now I know you're there for me. Now I know that I'm safe. Now you know you're safe. We're on the same team now. So whatever comes up, I'm not going to go into me versus you. I'm not worried about you thinking that I'm your enemy because I'm not liking something. We're already on the same team. So if it's a problem for me, it's a problem for you. If it's a problem for you, it's a problem for me. That's emotional connection. The curiosity around, like, what is it that we're doing or saying that is activating to our spouse? It could be that they're making meaning out of it that isn't true, but if it's a raw spot or an area of sensitivity for them based on their upbringing, and you love this person, you're going to want to care about that, right? So that means you don't go right into defending yourself. Well, I didn't mean that. No, that's not true. Don't be ridiculous, right? That does not create safety. What creates safety is, thank you for telling me that. I'm really glad that you shared that with me so I can be more aware. And if you do it right, you're owning your part and you're not just coming at your spouse. Part of creating emotional connection is being able to own, like, here's my vulnerability. Here's the meaning I give something that you did. I'm owning that. I'm not even saying that you did it. You didn't make me feel or think that, but that's what I did with it. And here's my ask of you, right? That's what we want to support in our spouse. And that's what we want to try to cultivate, creating that safety for ourselves too. If we've never had that, that is going to be a belief that needs to be changed. If you don't have that in your template of experience, you have no reason to believe that it's possible. You have no reason to believe that it's something that you can have, or that you deserve. It's going to feel really terrifying. But that's where the belief work comes in. So then you can go back to what we talked about in step 4, which is changing your limiting beliefs. You might have to do a lot of belief work in order to support that emotional connection piece. And I wouldn't even try to tackle the hot button issues until you have gone through the emotional connection piece of things. Then after emotional connection, the next step is repair and forgiveness. Now you're connected. Now you can bring up some things that were really hurtful. Maybe there was a betrayal that occurred, not just infidelity. There's other ways to be betrayed. But you want to be able to, now that you're connected, now that you have clear boundaries, now that you have the ability to regulate and you feel safe, you can really bring this stuff to the light, and not for the purpose of rehashing, but for the purpose of turning the page. This is what happened. This is how it impacted me. Hearing the healing words and actions that you need to hear, and vice versa. And then turning the page and saying, that was then, this is now, right? It's really hard to turn the page on something if it's still happening, or if there's still cues in your environment that are reminding you of the old story. We can't fully live in a new story until we build the new story too. So don't wait until you've repaired everything that's hurt you in the past. Be building. And that's what I meant by expanding the positive in the pattern interrupt. Be building a new narrative of your relationship so that you can stand firmly in that place and let go of the old story and say, you know what, that really did hurt. And I know that that's not what we're doing anymore. I know that my partner has grown and changed. I understand what it meant. Part of repair and forgiveness is knowing what, if you were betrayed, knowing what it meant to your partner, knowing what was going on for them, understanding the meaning for your spouse who betrayed you in whatever way that they have is very important for healing, because then you understand it, and then in that understanding, not just for you to understand and feel close to them, but in their conveying that understanding to you, they're growing, they're changing, they're becoming more self-aware, and they're in a much more conscious place now. So much of what we do is not conscious in relationships, but being able to become conscious and say, I did that because I was scared. I did that because I was actually angry and I was acting out. Whatever it is that you can own and come to the truth around, you grow from that. So the way it works is you look at your partner who betrayed you and you say, I forgive you because I see that you're not that same person anymore. You're not the same person that did that. You're different now. We're different now. And we're in a new foundation. So that's why we wait so long before we get to the really triggering stuff. If you start with that, you're just going to end up rehashing and go right back to a place of despair. All right. So then the next step is number 8. We've only got 2 more, is to receive your partner as they are without getting your projection, without projecting onto them your own stuff. Now, this is very much a part of owning your raw spots. This starts to emerge when you're building emotional connection. But when you can get yourself out of the way and just hear and receive your spouse as another person separate from you, that has their own ways of making meaning, that has their own history, their own perceptual filter, their own driving forces and values, separate from you. And that's normal. If you can hear that what they're saying through those lenses, you can just receive them without defensiveness, without, oh my God, here's what this means, or having your own reactions. Because what happens, and this is advanced, this is why this is step 8. This is not easy to do, to get ourselves out of the way, because really anything that we perceive to be real is always mediated through our own subjective experience of our environment. There's no such thing as like complete objectivity. We always have lenses on that have been informed by our experiences and the messaging that we've received. And so the trick is, and this is more almost like a spiritual stance, is to empty your cup and stay in the present moment and just hear and see what they are saying as evidence about who they are and nothing to do with you at all. And when you can do that, not only is that such an amazing gift to your spouse because they feel really seen and heard. Sorry, hang on, you guys. There's a siren going off. 1 second. Sorry, it goes off every day at this time. And my office is really close to the fire department. So, as I was saying, it's not just a gift to your partner to just receive them without your stuff getting in the way, because they feel so just in that nonverbal like presence and full attention without reactivity. It feels so good to them, but also it feels good to you because you see things in a new way. It's like the beginner's mind concept. It's like you have to be willing to be a beginner in looking at your spouse. It's hard to do if you've been with somebody for a long time. Like, we already know them. We already know all about them. We know we can predict exactly what they're going to do and say. We can make all kinds of assumptions, and they're probably going to be accurate about where they're coming from and what they meant by what they just said. But if you can practice actually forgetting all of that and coming to it from a complete, like as if you have total amnesia and you're seeing this person for the very first time, that is a really profound experience of seeing them through new eyes. It allows you to access love in a deeper way. It allows you to be free of your own reactivity that is just automatic and honestly sabotaging most of the time. And then they get to feel so safe with you. So I really recommend trying this. This is something that comes later. It's phase 3 in the couples cure because, like I said, it is really advanced. And then after that, the final phase is you're going to build your relationship consciously from a place of where your life dreams overlap. So in your vision that you did in step 1, in that vision, what you're also looking for is like, what are your guiding values? Why do you want these things? What is the why behind the what, right? Then you ask your partner the same thing. What is the why? So what do you want and why? Why is this important to you? And then you look at what those life dreams are that you have, and they're not going to be exactly the same because we're different people. But you find where they overlap, you find where you have commonalities, and you forget about the rest. Don't sweat it. Don't worry about like, oh, but their life dream is to travel and I don't want to travel. Oh no, what does that mean? I guess we're not compatible. That's not it. I don't really believe in compatibility, like in the sense of like, we don't like to do the same things. I don't really think that matters. What matters is, are you feeding yourself in your life dreams? Are the deal breakers covered? And then when you nourish yourself outside of the relationship, you come back to the relationship with so much more to give, and vice versa. So, what's really powerful is when you can consciously look at, all right, we share these dreams, we share these goals. Let's start here. How can we then turn this into a plan of action and an agreement between us? Almost like a blueprint for yourself. Like, we both have a life dream of financial security. And so we both really want to find a way to save money. Now, one person might want to save more money and the other person might want to spend more money. But you can, at least you have a guiding value. You both do want security. Now, that might look different for each of you, but it still overlaps. So, what could it look like? In what? How could you create it? How could you set up your dynamics in such a way, or what agreement could you make that would satisfy both of you? And you're asking the questions from the us place. How can we figure this out? Most people get stuck in positionality. Well, you want this and I want this. Oh, well, now what? Or now you just try to convince the other person of why your way is better and they're trying to convince you, or you're trying to argue against what they want and showing them why that's not right. And then you just end up fighting each other and it's me versus you. But when you get into the us place, which is phase 4 and the final phase, you're saying, this is important to you. This is important to me. It doesn't look exactly the same, but how can we find a solution that works for both of us? And there's nothing you can't do once you get on the same team. You might have a difference of opinion. It just means you might have more than one conversation. I think so many people feel like they have to solve it in one conversation. If we can't solve this in one conversation, we're doomed. Well, no, it just means you're not done yet. You got to come back to the table, pitch something else, and you work it out and you negotiate until you find something that works for both of you. And if you take the mental stance of, if it doesn't work for you, I can't be okay with it. I have to find a solution that works for both of us. If you take that stance and they take that stance, you'll always win. So that's it, you guys. Those are the 9 steps that I take my clients through. This is what I would recommend in this order: vision, leading with your goal in mind; radical pattern interrupt, which is about stopping what isn't working, tabling the hot button issues, and expanding the positive interactions. Number 3 is learning how to regulate your emotions. And that is between you and you. Doesn't matter what your spouse is doing or not doing. That's you. That's your relationship with yourself. Tapping is something I highly recommend. Check it out. Number 4, and this is just to recap, you guys. Number 4 is to change your limiting beliefs at the subconscious level. Number 5 is getting really clear on what your boundaries are, what is not okay, what is okay, not just for your spouse to do or say, or, certain aspects of your dynamic, but for yourself. What are you going, for me, my biggest work on boundaries was internal boundaries, not letting myself say certain things, or not letting my negative energy spill out onto others or move into a blaming mindset. I had to put a boundary on myself. Now, some of you might have that same challenge. Some of you might have a different challenge, which is, I need to be really clear inside of myself that I can communicate with my spouse, but not just communicate what's okay and what's not okay, but what will I do to uphold our boundary? No one else is responsible. When we are a grown up, obviously it would be great if we had been raised by parents that would model really great boundaries and honoring our boundaries so that we internalize that and it's second nature for us. But a lot of us have to learn this and it feels really uncomfortable. But I think it's a massive game changer and people underestimate the power of boundaries. Once you're clear on all of those first 5 steps, which is really the internal work, then we move into emotional connection. I really love the work of Dr. Sue Johnson. It's something that I draw heavily from in the exercises that I do with my clients, but you guys can check out Dr. Sue Johnson on YouTube, and she talks about emotional connection and what that actually is and things that you can do to create that. Number 7 is then you move into tackling the hot button issues, problem solving that. But part of that is also repair and forgiveness. That's really how I led that. Repair and forgiveness, letting go of the past. First, you have to talk about it. And there's a structure that you can follow, which is really just hearing each other out, not being defensive. It's a one-way street. The person that needs repair is going to be doing the one talking, right? The person who is giving repair is going to be there to give repair, not to defend, not to explain, but to give what the other person needs for repair. What has to be given for repair, by the way, I didn't mention this before, has to be given in the present moment. Okay. That means I need from you an agreement, or I need from you some validation or some acknowledgement of the impact that this had. Most often, when people are not repaired, it's because there wasn't enough of an acknowledgement of the impact that it had. There's either a minimization. People get hurt because their spouse is telling them that they're overreacting, or they shouldn't care, or it's been so long, but if something's been a really long time and you're still not repaired, it's probably because you didn't get what you really needed for repair. So you have to find out for yourself. It's different for different people. What do you need? What do you need to hear? Do you need an agreement? Do you need validation? Do you need an acknowledgement? Do you need an apology? Right. Figure out for yourself what you need for repair, and that's something that you could be given in the present moment. It's not going back into the past and saying what I really need was for that not to have happened. Okay. It's arguing with reality. We cannot change what's already happened. We can never change history, but we can start in the present moment. The future is created in the present moment. And the only way that we can really create a new future that transcends the history and our conditioning or the hurts is by bringing it to the light and then really letting it go once and for all. Now, this is a lot easier to do when you're actively building a new foundation, which that's what you're doing with the pattern interrupt and the vision, and realizing, okay, part of the pattern interrupt is getting rid of like the losing strategies and engaging the winning strategies in terms of being able to communicate in healthy ways. But those are the tips. A lot of people can find these tips online. You can find something that really resonates. But if you don't have this sort of scaffolding ahead of time, it's just going to feel like you're stabbing in the dark. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? So that's why I think that going in this order is really important. Step 8, again, receiving your partner as they are, receiving them without your own reactions getting in the way, with a beginner's mind. And then finally, step 9, building from your overlapping life dreams. So that's what my clients do. And it's pretty amazing how much you can change, even just on your own, as long as there's not a precondition, like I mentioned at the beginning of the call. Some of you are new, or have joined later. You might not have heard this part. Really briefly, a precondition is something that might need to be addressed before you can get any traction. Those things include a full diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder in your spouse. You'll never get leverage. You'll never be able to have a healthy relationship with that person. That's a precondition. A precondition would be an acute mental health condition, not just your standard garden variety depression and anxiety. I'm talking about like significant mental health stuff that's not being medicated, that is adversely affecting the relationship. And same with addiction. And if your spouse is actively involved in outside relationships, if their attachment needs, even if it's not a sexual affair, but it's like, an emotional affair, that's a precondition. Like when I say precondition, I mean precondition for doing the inside out work on your own. Now, if the person who has the precondition wants to be part of the solution, that's awesome. Then we can help. But, I guess that's the main thing that I'm trying to say is that, but if the person that has the precondition, like if you tell me that your spouse has fallen off the wagon and they're on these major benders and that they've got bipolar 1 and they're off their meds, that has to be, it doesn't matter what you do on your side of the street when they have a precondition, right? Because you have no leverage. So barring that though, you can follow these 9 steps on your own Your partner doesn't even have to know anything, and you can still transform the relationship. So, but chances are they're going to be curious. They're going to be really interested in, like, what are you doing? Because they're going to notice, and then you can share, and then they might really want to participate in what you're working on. So that's always a possibility, but you do not have to wait for that. So that's it, you guys. If you have any questions, which I'm assuming that some of you will, please raise your hand and I'll just kind of come to you in order. And then when it's your turn, I have everybody default muted because that way it just reduces background noise and distractions. Um, just unmute yourself when I call on you for your question. Okay. So Mel, you raised your hand.
Hi, thank you so much.
Hi,
Um,
you're welcome.
so I've been working on the inside out for a while now. I've taken your master class and have been doing a deep dive into a lot of personal work. And I can tell that it really has kind of stopped the bleeding in some issues that my husband and I were having, and our dynamic has changed quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But just as a backstory, we're married over 20 years, no
Mm-hmm.
kids. And eh, he still feels through our dynamic changes distancing a bit from me, and he said this in counseling, which we've been in with emotionally focused.
Mm-hmm.
um, Over time it's just been difficult to keep up the stamina to like stay the course, and work on myself
Mm-hmm.
and stay on my side of the street and things like that. And lately I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling myself distance. I'm trying to like just kind of see what it would your advice be for someone who's like, I'm starting to like flag a bit in my efforts to keep things going.
Well, first of all, I mean, it is hard to keep, it is very draining when you're disrupting. Pattern interrupts take a lot of energy.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, give yourself a lot of grace and compassion, right? You're going to have days where you just feel like you need to stop for oxygen or take a break or something like that. And know that that's normal and that it will come and go. So, don't give it too much meaning. Don't think that it's just going to be that way permanently. It
Mm-hmm.
could be just like a temporary lull in your energy, or you might be doubting yourself too. So I guess I'd want to ask you, Mel, what are the things that are challenging you in particular? Where do you feel like you're losing steam?
Well, I feel like like I said, stop the bleeding. Our patterns are better. Our interactions are much better, but we're kind of in almost a roommate status and have been for a while, where there's some emotional connection. He calls me his best friend, but there's just not a lot of deeper connection, it feels like. And when I make bids for connection, like when he makes a bid, I'm always there. When I
Mm-hmm.
make a bid, I don't always feel, even if it's something simple and I'm trying not to be like too anxiously attached, and go
Mm-hmm.
after him,
Mm-hmm.
it's not, I'm not getting a response, or I'm getting a
Mm.
negative or ambivalent response, basically.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and is this something that you guys have talked about?
A
Is
bit,
he
yeah.
aware that, is he recognizing that these are bids for connection that mean a lot to you?
I think I think it's been pointed out several times. We are still in therapy for the time being, and it has been brought up that basically these are bids for connection for me, and they're not like grand, like I need you to buy me flowers every day. It's
Mm-hmm.
literally say good morning when I say good morning to you, things like that. And he
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't always seem to pick up that it needs a
Mm-hmm.
response, or maybe he's unwilling to. And he's
Mm-hmm.
said that he feels like he self distances at times, and he doesn't really know why.
Okay. And then he's complaining because he feels like you're pulling away.
Well, I feel like I'm pulling away now. I feel like continually hearing him say, well, I realize I'm distancing myself from her, and hearing the therapist say basically, you can, when she bids for connection, you're not there for her. But when you bid for connection, she's always there for you. When I hear
Mm-hmm.
things like that over and over again, it kind of deflates my
Yeah.
desire.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, I mean, there's a couple of thoughts I have, but the first one was that I see this almost as a boundary thing in the sense that for you, the there's a line. It's like there's certain things that you need to feel close to him. He's not as if you're always there for him, he never has to feel his own attachment needs going unmet.
Mm,
So you could let him know, like for me, I'm here to create a mutually fulfilling emotional connection where your availability to me is predictable and consistent, and mine is to yours as well.
Mhm.
I am not willing to participate in a non-reciprocal, non-mutual emotional connection. So
Mhm.
what that means is, here's what I need to feel close to you, and here's what I will do if I'm not getting those things. So,
Mhm.
and it's not, and it's just, you're just saying what you're going to do. So in other words, hey, if you're pulling away from me and you don't say good morning to me when I say good morning to you, and I'm making bids that are falling on deaf ears, I'm not going to be feeling as close to you. So when you reach out to me, I can't guarantee that I will be as predictable or as available to you, because I'm just trying to take care of myself. And it's a
Mhm.
boundary. It's a boundary. So then he will realize, like, okay, if I want to have a consistent, predictable emotional connection with Mel, I will have to show up with the same.
Mhm.
Right. And it doesn't have to be even a big, long discussion. It's just you're communicating a boundary and saying, here's what I need in order to have this. This is what I need. You can do whatever you want with that information. You
Mhm.
choose. You're a grown up. If you feel yourself pulling away from me, that's your choice. If you're not going to do anything about it, just know that that's not in support of what I'm trying to create. And so therefore, I will remove my energy from a dynamic that I don't want to feed.
Mhm.
That's how I would approach it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. And thank you for saying that it may be a temporary lull, because I'll be honest, after being in therapy for a while now, it feels like it's been a long, long time. So I'm hoping
Yeah,
it'll come
no, I
back.
get it. It is a long game. And sometimes when it's the person who's not coming up to the line, it's a boundary failure when someone doesn't come to the line, right? Like,
Mhm.
he's not crossing the line, but he's not even coming up to the line. And so what you want to support is reciprocity and consistency in
Mhm.
emotional connection.
Mhm.
And if that's not what's being served, then you pull your energy back too. And then you have to go, and this is why it's hard, is because you have to go without the attachment needs being met
Mhm.
temporarily in order to pattern interrupt. The pattern interrupt for you is going to be for him to not feel such a quite predictable and reliable, consistent, mutual, or not mutual. I said, sorry. I mean, just like that your availability for him whenever he wants it. He doesn't have any motivation. So this is what I mean when I say boundaries are leverage. Boundaries help the other person recognize what's in it for them. Right now, he might just feel like he's doing you a favor, but the truth of the matter is that by him saying good morning to you and being available to you when you need him, that's going to be serving his goal to stay married to you and to have you there for him when he needs you.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's making him hold up his end. You don't have to do the work for both of you anymore. But that temporarily will mean you might go without some of those needs being met. And it's sad and
Mhm.
you might be grieving, but that's part of staying in your lane. And that's what's going to help him discover in his own relationship with himself of like, oh, this doesn't feel good. What do I need to do? Like, what he's not feeling his own needs, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that sometimes boundaries helps the other person get in touch with what they need and not just make it all about, but for the person, because I was also the person was like, I was the one with the needs. My husband wasn't the one with needs. Well, it wasn't true. It's not true that he didn't have needs, but that was the narrative that kept him comfortable.
Mhm.
Right. And so when I started to pull back a little bit more and he started to realize, oh, I want that too, then he found his own motivation. And it wasn't just about, I have to do this for her. It was, who do I want to be as a man and what kind of marriage do I want to have? And I have to play a part in that, in creating what I want.
Mhm.
So I hope that helps, Mel.
It did. Thank you
Stay
so
the
much.
course. You can do it. I know it's exhausting.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, you guys? If you can't figure out how to raise your hand, you can just unmute yourself and just chime in with a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Christian.
Hey, how you doing there?
Good. How are you?
I just logistical point here. One of my dear buddies who's in a group that I joined almost a year ago called Man on Fire, David Mailer's group.
Yeah, I've heard of that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a great group and it's been incredible. It ended, my 90 days ended many months ago, and I created a group of selected guys from that process because I didn't want to end working on myself, especially with the support of brothers that are, conscious men wanting to become better beings in this world, bringing our gift to the world, and better for wives and everybody. And it's been incredible. And my brother just turned me on to hearing you. So I came on late. So it's just kind of a logistical question. Noticed you're recording it. I would love to be able to hear it. I've also been watching my little girl today, so I haven't been able to be fully here, but I have headphones on, doing my best to listen. And I just have to say, you're brilliant. You actually blow my mind. You're hitting everything I would like to tell my wife, but she wouldn't hear it from me. So I was thinking, I wanted to go to some situation that would talk equally to men and women, because the thing I've been in is mainly to men. And
Yeah.
I really want to engage. I don't have a thing about whether it's a woman or a man. It's just somebody who's clear. It's not biased gender wise. It's just
Yeah.
really understand the dynamic of relationship. And you're hitting it. So everything I heard, I mean, I just got to say, you just, and I'm
Well,
hard to
thank you.
impress. Thank you
Well,
for the
thank you
work
so
you've
much.
done. Yeah.
I'm really glad that that was helpful to you. And yes, you will be getting a recording. One of the things I said at the beginning is that I'm recording this to send to be, it was a very short notice thing. So I knew that a lot of people weren't going to be able to make it. So I will
Mhm.
be sharing this with my subscriber list. I'll also be posting the recording in my private group called Art of Healthy Authentic Marriages. You're welcome to invite your wife to join that group too. It's just a free community group, but it is private.
Yeah, I would like to know so you have a way to connect with me when I joined? You have my email, or how did you say I would get that info?
Well, actually, if you
Because
go to Facebook and you just type, if you just, you know how you can go to the search field in Facebook, if you just type in Art of Healthy Authentic Marriages,
let me
that's
write
my
that
group. You'll
down.
find it. Yeah.
Okay,
Art of
it's
Healthy. I'll put it in the chat box actually, for others too that are listening.
okay.
Or you can email me and ask me for the link and I'll send you the link. You can always email me at monika.hoyt@gmail.com.
And how do you spell your name? M-I-K, is it K or
It's
C?
K. It's MONIKA .Hoyt, HOYT.
Hoyt.
Y as in yellow.
Yes, I thought
HOYT.
HOYT
Mm-hmm.
at.
At Gmail.
Great. Okay, I got you there. And then I could talk to you more about this. No, it's great. I want to hear what you do on other levels, whether they're private or groups or whatever. So that's great. I appreciate your
Yeah, well, thanks.
directions there.
I appreciate that. And I do offer a free just call for people that if somebody is, wanting to get some additional support around some of the things that I shared today,
Mm-hmm.
both I have a coach and I both take calls that it's just a free call, but it's to kind of get a little bit more of a deep dive around your specific dynamics and
Mm-hmm.
see if there's any, and if it's something that we can support you on, we'll let you know, but if not, we'll point you in the right direction too, and just try to connect you with the right resources. And so that's always an option too.
It's
And I'll be
yeah.
posting that. I can put that link actually in the chat. Hang on. Okay. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you were able
Sounds
to make
great.
it. And are
Yeah.
you on my mailing list, or how would I
I don't.
do you
I'm.
want to do you want to send me your email address and then and just say, hey, send me the replay and I'll make sure that you're on my list that gets the replay.
Yeah. I do. It's mine's easy. It's Wow Studios, all one word. Wow Studios at Gmail too. It's Wow, like WOW Studios is plural. I've got one
At
hand.
Gmail?
Yeah, I've got one hand trying to dial with my thumb, and my daughter, my other arm sleeping. So if you were able
Oh,
to write, wow, that would
I
be
wrote it down.
awesome.
I
Okay,
got it.
awesome. Thank you,
Yep.
Sylvia. My name
I'll
is
send it to
Christian
you.
Wolf. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
And thanks so much for that info. I appreciate it all.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, have a good rest of the day. Anybody else have any questions? If anybody's not on my subscriber list that wants to get this replay, just put your email in the chat box, or you can email me your email address and say, hey, I'd like the replay. And I'll make sure that you're on that list if you're not already. Okay.
I do
All right,
have
you
one
guys.
quick question.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, Art, I see your hand is raised. I'm sorry, I missed
I'm
that.
sorry. I'm sorry.
No,
I just
no,
named
no.
my name myself. I joined late. I apologize.
No, I'm glad you're here.
I just have a quick question. My wife and I are currently in a pretty long separation, and
Mhm.
I did listen to you speaking about the emotional connection, feeling safe emotionally, and I've been having a really difficult time trying to reestablish that. I feel like she's really pushing for a divorce, and it seems like the more I try and build that emotional connection, the more it's pushing her away. And um,
Mm.
I'm currently in a men's program, and it's emotional based program, and everything that they're really telling me in the program is that there's nothing you can really say or try to spark within her. It's just something that she needs to feel from you, and
Yes.
it, build that trust back. And but I didn't know if you had any suggestions as far as little um
Well, it depends
helpful
on the reason. So I'll ask you a question before I answer your question. Are you guys separated and she's got her walls up because she was hurt and she's
yeah,
wanting and she's trying to protect herself, or because she had unmet needs in the relationship and she doesn't think it can be different? Is that why?
I think that it was just unmet needs, emotional needs. And
Gotcha.
I just really was more, I just really didn't know what I didn't know, and was
Mm-hmm.
extremely unintelligent, from a woman's perspective. And just it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. I mean, I've learned so much in so many months, but obviously I can't sit there and tell her, oh, I've changed, and oh, I know this, I know that, and let's build a connection back. It almost has to happen more organically. And
Yes, yes. Yeah. So you're right. And I think that the hardest part is being patient and also recognizing the opportunities to build emotional connection without actually talking about the relationship or saying, okay, now let's talk. I want to show you what I've learned. You don't have to do that. You can just look for the
right,
opportunities to be attuned to her,
right,
where you notice if something's up, you ask her a question, or if she shares something, the way that you show interest, the way that you receive her, the way that you
right,
are curious, the way that you can validate her feelings. You can do that in the smallest of ways, even just
yeah,
as friends. That cultivates a sense of safety. Then she starts to feel like that. I like that. I want that. I want more of that. And she's going to start to lean into it more. So look for those
okay.
little random
Mm,
informal opportunities. And it sounds like you're already
yeah,
doing that.
yeah. I
The
try to
heart.
do it as often as I can. Yeah,
Okay.
in a subtle way. It's
Do
I
you
don't. I
feel that
guess
she feels it? Do you feel like there's any shifting on her part? Is she leaning in a little
def-
more?
yeah, definitely. I think she's testing me a lot. That when
Mm-hmm.
she does feel that, I think she starts to test me, and it'll be like I'll go to the house, and we have two daughters, 18 and 15, and I'll go there and help them out, do a few things around the yard, whatever it might be, and have a little interaction with her. And then maybe the next day she'll send a text and say, every interaction with me, you feel like it's another opportunity to reconcile, and that's not going to happen. And so she kind of
Well,
she'll throw that.
is she
Sorry.
saying that because you're talking to her about the relationship? Are you trying to convince her? Are you being overt, or are you like, why is she saying that?
Yeah, sometimes I guess I don't really talk about the relationship unless she brings it up. And then when she does bring it up, she seems to kind of really um, harp on the past, and she just doesn't seem to want to
Mm,
get beyond the past issues. And I guess
mm,
we've been together for so long. We've been together probably 30 years. We're married 22.
mhm.
So I mean, I guess she's going back from, she has found every little negative thing that's ever happened, and she
Mhm.
feels like she's pinpointed it back to me not being
Mhm.
emotionally present and not,
Mhm.
understanding it from her, from how the
Mhm.
feminine dynamic really works. And
Mhm.
it's such a horrible thing. I feel a lot of anxiety because it's like, boy, I've learned so much, and I have, not that it's not even that, I just haven't had the opportunity to apply it enough. And I feel like, man, I just, if I have a little bit more time and we spend
Mhm.
together, I know that she can start to feel
Mhm.
this good vibe and trust my changes.
Mhm.
But she's really pushing, she's really leaning the other way towards a divorce. And
Mm.
it's hard because I guess that anxiety inside of me, I have to really keep it calm and say,
Yeah.
okay, if that's what you want, then I support you. And it's extremely hard when you're trying to save your
Yeah.
marriage, but yet not really
Yeah.
tell her that I'm trying to save my marriage.
Right, right. I know it's like a fine art. And I think that you want to find a balance between accepting what she's saying without resistance, but at the same time, quietly building that connection as friends that has
Yeah,
her questioning her decision. So I would say
yeah,
don't offer her any resistance. And like you
right,
said, really regulating your own anxiety. It's very difficult to go all in on something when you can't control the outcome. It's a very vulnerable position. It creates anxiety. But
sure,
if you're really clear on what your vision is, and maybe listen, if you came late, I would recommend listening to the replay
okay,
and following those steps. You're also
okay,
welcome to book a call. I work with people in your situation all the time
okay,
where they're separated and they're really leaning out hard, and it's only because, not because they don't love you, but because they think it can't be different and they haven't
right,
gotten enough of the repair that they need. And so,
right,
you know, we could always have a call and we could talk
okay,
about it in more depth. But I think if you
okay,
can regulate yourself, try not, if she brings it up, just say,
yeah,
you're right. I am really sorry. I wish I could go back in time and
right,
apply what it is that I've learned now. But
yeah,
I hear you, and you're just listening and accepting. Don't use it as an opportunity to try to convince of what
yeah,
you want or the outcome, because then she'll
right,
resist it and feel like you're just trying to get what you want and
yeah,
you're not really understanding what this is for me. Now, it sounds like you've done a lot of great work, and
yeah,
when it's been a really long pattern, it just takes time and consistency
yeah,
and
yeah,
looking at it as planting seeds every single day until finally one day
right,
everything sprouts, right?
right, right. The problem,
So
the,
keep the
the
faith.
problem, right? Thank you. And the problem was I made so many mistakes early on in the separation that it's like, oh my gosh, I look back and
Mm,
say, oh,
mhm,
I was really being needy, really one of
mm.
the worst traits probably to display by any means. And I didn't realize how needy I was being, and desperate, and
Yeah, that's such a hard spot to be in. Well, forgive yourself though, because you're not alone. A lot of people go through that. And it sounds like you're not doing that anymore. So
no, no,
you've
definitely
already
feel
had a
like
major arc.
yeah, yeah, it's taken a lot, for me to understand and fully come full circle to really truly understand the feminine dynamic and see things from the woman's side of things, and just truly what it means to be masculine in a relationship, and
Mm,
not just that macho man that's just there to, for financial support and those things. It's for that emotional safety and that emotional bond, and that
yeah,
emotional connections. It's everything in a relationship. And
it really is.
I've been so stupid for so long. It's
Well, I don't
heartbreaking.
think it's ever I personally, and of course I'm biased because this is, my life's work, but I think it's never too late. Now,
Right,
whether or not she can be open to that possibility remains to be
right,
seen. But
right.
the person with the stronger beliefs the stronger beliefs will absorb the weaker beliefs. So if you
Yeah,
can keep really strong beliefs about what's possible without
okay,
being in any convincing energy or neediness, then she will feel that and start to believe what you believe too. So
Okay.
hold that belief and remember that that does get communicated energetically. You don't have to say it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're fighting the good fight. I know it's not easy.
Yeah, it's not. I know. I wish I'd found you and this other program early. Last year. I wish I found you.
Yeah. Well, feel free to book a call and we can talk to and just see if there's anything else we can do to supplement what you're working on. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You're so welcome. Hang in there.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Any other questions for me about my talk? It's fine if you don't now. If you do later, you can always email me or you can join my group, Art of Healthy Authentic Marriages, if you're not already in there. People tag me with questions in there all the time. So I welcome your questions. And also for folks that are maybe listening to this if in the recorded version later, same applies. So I hope this is helpful, you guys. Feel free to book a call at monikahoyt.com/talk if you want some additional support around this stuff. It's a free call. It's just to, offer some additional support based on your individual unique dynamics. And then just join the group. We said we do live streams in there periodically. And it's just a great place for not just the live streams, but also peer support and some coaching support because me and my coaches are in there all the time. So I hope you guys had a great day. I hope you all have a wonderful Mother's Day weekend. Thanks for joining on such short notice, and we'll catch you guys next time. Have a good night.
Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.